Hello and welcome to the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast, and we are continuing all those conversations about building a property business that ultimately creates freedom. So yes, we need the cash flow to get there and we need the systems and the processes, but ultimately all of that is because we want to have freedom. And there's lots of different angles to freedom, and that's what Dom and I are discussing today, and particularly thinking about finding that path of least resistance through the angle of, is it better to change your life when there's a problem, or is it better to change yourself? Very different perspective on how we deal with the challenges, and it's something that Dave and I have really embraced over the last few years with dramatic results. So Dom and I discuss this and open your mind to maybe an easier way that you can solve challenges. So without further ado, here's myself and Dom. Hello, Dom.
Hello, Jackie. I'm excited about this topic.
So the topic today is, should we change what we're doing or should we change ourselves? So
Yes.
should we change what we're doing in our business or should we change how we're looking at the business? Where does your mind go?
It's a bit like the question of actually, who are we being versus what are we doing? You know, we're a human doing, not a human being. Or no, rather, we're a human being, not a
Powerful quote there.
So yeah, I mean, we could jump straight into the answer of the question. The question of the answer. Oh my goodness, words aren't coming out clearly. Go on.
Well, it's a perfect day for. So I feel like for me, this topic came up to my mind to cover today because I've had like an interesting couple of weeks with. I think my hormones are off balance, and it's really shifted. It's made me feel not so great about stuff. And in the past, my natural reaction when I would feel that way, I would then start going, what is wrong in my life that I have to change? And my mind wanted to do that this time. It started looking for the things. It started to happen. I was aware that it was happening, which wouldn't have been the case before. And I spoke to Dave about the stuff that I was wanting to try and blame in the business for what that was. And actually, it was a very short conversation for me to just get my perspective again, that it was nothing to do with any of that. There's just some sort of slight chemical imbalance at the moment, which is not making me feel great, but that's nothing to do with anything that's going on in the business. And that just for me was just an interesting shift in how things would have happened before, because obviously we've organized our business and our lives in a very structured way to spend this much time on this is the stuff that I'm happy to do, I don't really want to do that. Like, it's all been orchestrated along a load of preferences that I have had, that Dave has had over the years. And ultimately, what I've kind of experienced over the last couple of weeks would normally have resulted in another preference that I then start to go and change things. But this time I have actually said, no, this is just a feeling. And for me, it's such a habitual feeling, and it comes from this chemical stuff that's going on, that actually, if I just instead sit and focus on that feeling instead, it actually does start to shift and move. Maybe we'll talk about that separately, but that's where this has come from for me, this conversation.
Yes. And I think it's common, right? A lot of people get very strong feelings about something, and then they either do something about it or they don't do something about it. And it's two sides of the coin. You know, we've got our head trying to make logical decisions. This is best for the family. This is best for my business, etc., etc. This is best for my health. And then you've got the feelings. You've got stuff inside which we can't really understand or explain, and yet they're there. And our brain tries to justify what that feeling or create what that feeling means. So we've always got this tension, this pulling of feeling and thinking. And it's like, when do we listen to our feelings? When do we listen to our thoughts? Yeah, and then when do we do nothing? And so one of the things I've been learning about is actually certain people, they make up their mind and they just go for it, and that's fine. But not everyone's like that. There's people who they maybe get really excited at an event and they're about to buy something, and they go with that sudden, lit up feeling of energized motivation, like a Tony Robbins event or something like that, and they purchase, spend a whole load of money on something, and then they kind of later regret it. And those people are people a bit more like me, I'd say, who actually need to, yes, be inspired, motivated, but then sit with the feeling and allow it to kind of go back to sort of the normal, and then make a decision about what to do about it. because we've got in this thing called human design, we've got an emotional authority. So we need to be aware that we need to ride the wave of pleasure, inspiration, whatever it is, and come back to homeostasis, balance, as it's also known. And then from there, then we make the decision about what it is that we really want to do, rather than getting caught up in the emotion, which is,
that is a really interesting way of thinking about it. I have the same thing myself. Like I often get very excited by these ideas, various points of like, oh gosh, we could rent out the motorhome when we're not using it. And I get very excited. And in the past I would have like forged on, I'd get it listed on some place, choose some dates, and then it just becomes another thing that I'm like, trying to manage and do, and it doesn't feel so good. But now if I just have those ideas, I'm just like, okay, if I'm still thinking about it in like a week or two and I still feel good, then I'll maybe start moving forwards on it. But just take a chill. But I think the challenge is that we're all not all, the majority of people in the UK, which is or people who are from the world, we are so in our own heads that we don't know how to listen to the feelings. And I have a lot of conversations with mentees about, is this what I'm meant to be doing? I'm not sure this is the thing I'm meant to be doing. But the problem is that is all kind of from a very rational, trying to work it through situation. And my personal opinion that I'm coming to now is that you cannot think your way into the thing that you're meant to be doing. Like you can't be like, oh, maybe this is my purpose. Let me plan out that and try and do that and do this research like that. You're just basically going to jump onto something else that subsequently you're going to end up feeling the same as you do right now with the thing that you are doing. Because actually you've got to get underneath it and find out a way to feel happier and enjoy more what you're doing right now. And by enjoying more what you're doing right now, that leads to the purpose. And the purpose is not the thing that you have to change your life around, in my opinion. The purpose is what you're already doing, but finding how to feel great about that, even if it maybe isn't what you would choose.
Right. Yes, exactly. And knowing what feelings, what they mean, and what to pay attention to, because like for a glass of wine, that was a really nice glass of wine, really enjoyed that, I might just have another one. There's that feeling of, this is really enjoyable, I should follow my joy. But actually then we know internally, our body knows that actually that's not the right thing to do, because alcohol is ultimately a poison. So how do we help people discern what are the right feelings to follow and kind of make decisions on, make changes in our life for, versus the ones that actually are detrimental and which are habitual?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think the hard thing is it's a process to go through. I think you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to change it, I'm going to do it this other way now, because actually you're right, you're so habitual in thinking and doing it the other way. And because you've been so of the thinking mind for so long in terms of how you make decisions, there's a whole host of like emotional crap basically that you've not processed, that you have to kind of work your way through to get really to the truth underneath it all. I don't know if I've said it on this podcast, but like my way of dealing with this now is that I will meditate every day and I will look for the uncomfortable feeling. And particularly on days where I'm doing things that I would perceive to be work, I have a habitual feeling that is naturally inside of me, which is like, and it's taken a lot of time sitting with to be able to describe it this clearly, but it's like it starts at the root of my spine, it's like tight around the base of my back, it kind of comes forward and kind of like grips in the lower part of my abdomen, and then it comes up and it kind of starts to try and like almost like a reaching out of myself sensation, and then it comes up and wraps itself around my heart, and it's all tension and discomfort. And the way that I have, that's just how I've created in the reactions I've had to the world as I've grown up. And that has just made me I now behave a certain way when I feel like that, which is like planning, action, doing stuff. But actually if I'm doing all of that because it doesn't feel very good. And actually, if instead of following what my mind does when I feel that way, which is organize your to-do list, plan out your diary, make sure your mentees are doing this, make sure the property projects are doing that, make sure the team is doing this, like all this stuff if I said, go, okay, just like let all that go. And instead, let's just be aware of how I'm feeling. And rather than letting the mind try and rationalize, I let it pass. And I just keep coming back and focusing on the feeling. And I think it's the case for everyone, but from my own personal experience, it's like it's a lot of pain. Like it's all this old painful stuff that's happened in terms of I perceived it to be painful. I didn't process it properly at the time. There's
Right.
one instance when I was in like year one at primary school, I the teacher set us like an exercise to do, and I did the exercise in the exercise book, but then I wanted to really please her, so I did the whole exercise book, and I thought she was going to be delighted with me for doing all this, going above and beyond. And I gave it to her, and she screamed at me.
Oh,
She took me down in front of the whole class,
oh no.
publicly shamed me. It was
Yeah.
awful. And like quite often with me, when I think about work in terms of the feeling, this memory often comes to my mind, and this feeling that I've described comes up. And so if I can instead sit with that feeling, because at that time I was like, what, 6 or something? Like I couldn't process what was going on. And so I just pushed it down and tried not to deal with it. And then my whole personality is basically partly formed around that. Whereas if you can instead like realize that, acknowledge it, for me, I have to kind of almost like experience some of the pain that was there as part of it. I cry pretty much most days as my way of letting go.
Mm.
And then it becomes more to homeostasis, as you say, and I can approach then the work from a place of, yeah, more balance.
Yeah, balance and peace. Yeah, and it
Mm.
makes me think for the listeners that um, it's good to know that basically all feelings are memories. Um,
Mm.
when we have a strong feeling, whether it's a feeling to please somebody, or a feeling that we need to control the situation, or that we have to be really vigilant, or we have to get all the detail right. These are all triggers that have usually formed in childhood. It could even be an ancestral thing. Just like people have diseases that run in families, there are traumas and feelings that run in families too. And it's recognizing that all those feelings that keep coming up usually partly to do with our history. And so it's, yeah,
Mm.
so if we can effectively only really make important decisions when we're feeling at peace, then we know
Mm.
that it's going to be a much better outcome, because peace is if you're measuring the frequency of the vibration coming off your mind and heart when you're at peace, that's a much more powerful state than if you're in a state of guilt or fear or anger, which is
Mm.
very negative. So for the listeners, if you're trying to make a decision, or if you're trying to work out what to do, if the feeling is effectively negative, like anger and fear and guilt and shame and apathy, don't make a decision. Don't even go there. We need to get ourselves into, as you say, homeostasis, a balance, ideally in a state of joy and peace and love,
And trust.
and trust. Yes, exactly. And then go from there. And also acceptance, accepting whatever happens. You know what, sometimes people have to try things, and it's okay. Don't kill yourself or blame yourself if you get it wrong. Just be
Mm.
okay. I'm experimenting. This life is a journey.
And also like getting it wrong is in the eye of the beholder anyway. Like
Right.
we're kind of just labeling things as like that is a good outcome, that is a bad outcome. But
Mm.
actually if you stop, like, if you really think about the bad things, okay, I couldn't have done this a few years ago. I now look at the things that I perceived as the bad things in my life. When I look at them now with the perspective of letting go of a load of stuff, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad that project didn't
Mm.
go to plan, because all the things I learned from that not going to plan, and the decisions that I subsequently made, and the ways that I can help people, I are I wouldn't have all of that.
Yes,
And so therefore, was it bad,
you're
or
right.
was it actually the best thing, one of the best things that could have happened?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I always get quite excited when I'm working with someone and their life's going to pot and everything's crashing down, because I know that a massive change is coming. The universe abhors a void, so if something is coming to an end, a relationship, a business, something's failing, it's an opportunity to create something new, because everything which is created comes from the unknown, comes from the unmanifest. So it's a creative time, and so, as you say, don't see a negative thing as a negative thing. It's just a thing.
A thing,
It's, yeah, an opportunity.
no thing.
No thing. There we go.
So I guess same question to you then, Dom. What's your perspective on how you come to making a decision then? Like, what do you do if you're kind of like not in such a good state? How do you come back to making a decision from more of a place of truth?
So my middle name is Flip Flop.
I didn't know that. I
No,
wouldn't have said that.
I'm joking. It's just something I'll go through at the moment, just flip-flopping the whole time. Very, very difficult. And I think here's the thing: we get as we grow, we become more and more certain about our identity and who we are. But actually, then we get sent effectively bigger challenges. Just like growing a business, you have bigger challenges as you grow the business. So I don't think it ever stops, and we have to kind of find a new level of our awareness in order to learn how to break through that next phase in our life and make better decisions. But similar to you, I think the best thing is to allow the emotional wave to ride and make a decision when you're in a neutral state. So usually the best ideas and best decisions, most clarity comes to me, after a meditation, or usually in particular, going for a run, walking through nature. That's when it's sort of the guidance comes most easily. Some people it's in the shower, other people it's in the bath. Whatever works for you. I would make that a habitual practice, like you do with your meditation, of allowing yourself to listen to possibly higher guidance, if that's what you want to call it, or maybe just intuition.
And how are you? I think it's more of a female thing, this whole crying thing. I've noticed it as a theme with other female clients that I'm working with. Like
Yes.
they also cry as an emotional way of processing.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
different from men, right? Like how are you letting go of stuff?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because although I'm sort of there's like crying, like all the emotion coming out, and this sort of wobbly voice and everything else, and then there's effectively waking up from
Release.
a release. There we go. Waking up from meditation, and I've got tears in my eyes, and that I guess maybe is a form of release as well. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think so. I get releases from exercise, from working out. There's definitely a lot of release there. From qigong, yoga. It's a great way of sort of allowing the energy to pass through you. And being out in nature obviously is great. Whether you're tree hugging or just sort of breathing in fresh air, something like that helps with releasing energy that might be stuck inside you as well. Because we are energetic beings, and energy flows, and when it gets stuck, that's when you find disease happens, and discomfort and pain and tension and stuff like that.
So okay, yeah, it's really interesting. I'm wondering, when is there a time to change the external? Like really, I'm not sure that this is the answer yet, but my answer at the moment is I don't think there necessarily is a time to change the external. Like, yeah, you could argue that if you just change yourself, everything changes.
Right.
What's your mind at the moment?
I would agree with that. I learned the idea, the philosophy, the concept that life happens from the inside out. And that is entirely true. But obviously the outside world also affects you, but it's a reflection of what's going on inside of you. When you're fast asleep, you may as well be dead. You wouldn't know about it. It's when you're awake that the world is happening, but it's always your perception of what's happening. And therefore, if you change your perception, that's when the world outside changes. So it is the inside out. I think if you want to change yourself, change your habits, change your perception, and then the world around you will catch up. It's slower, obviously, because it's kind of the physical world, and you can think a lot faster than something comes into fruition in, like building a house. Have the idea in your head very fast. Actually building it will take several months. So when you change the inside on the inside and you decide, I'm going to be someone else now, I'm going to be someone new, that's when you can start to change the outside world from in that direction effectively. And in terms of timing, I think sometimes the world sort of it has something to teach you, and you have to be open. If there are things that are happening more than once, it's usually there's a lesson for you to get. So it's kind of just working out what that lesson is. But yeah, following your heart, because your heart was there before your brain and will be there to the moment you die, and your brain might not always be quite so compos mentis. So following the heart is a good one. Even better, following the certainty that is contained in the spine. It's kind of, because sometimes the heart can be very emotional and not see the other side. So if you think of heart and brain as two sides of the same coin, and you've always got both, the heart is more powerful. It is better to listen to that. But ultimately, sometimes it can get carried away as well, from the chemicals that are released around, all sorts of love and other things. So yeah, it's not an
Mm.
easy answer, but as much as possible, make decisions and change from a place of peace.
And have we spoken much about the surrender experiment yet on the podcast? Have you and Dave spoken
Dave,
about it?
Dave and I have definitely mentioned it a couple of times. It is one of those wonderful books that is definitely worth reading. Yeah, yeah. So
It's if you haven't read it, it's by a guy called Michael Singer, who has just got this, has been on this incredible journey through his life of what he's learned and where that's led him in terms of the achievements he's had in his life. But he's used all of it. He's not gone out and sought it in the same way that most of us are. Like, we're like, this is my objective, I'm going to go out and do this thing. He's kind of focused on feeling good within himself,
mm,
and then stuff has kind of manifested itself around him, and he's just followed what life has presented.
right,
um and it's just such a, for me, it just turns the whole thing on its head in terms of how
right,
you do things. For me,
right.
being like a very planned person,
Mm,
this guy didn't have a plan but has achieved far more, in his life than I have, or many other people who are planning.
right.
So, like, what? But then it's like, well, then in our culture, I feel like that idea of just being like, oh, I don't really know, what I'm doing, I'm just focusing on having a, feeling good. It's not very socially acceptable.
It's true, but it's the way the world is going at the moment. I think if you listen to some of the mystics, and some people might kind of want to turn off now, but so before the year 2000, it was the era of Pisces, and as you know, Pisces is two fish going in opposite directions. That represents the head and the heart, where it's kind of effectively been split, but it's been a very much sort of a masculine thinking dominated world. Now we are moving into a different age, the age of Aquarius apparently is what they call it, and it's much more coming together of the heart and mind. And so there's a lot more sort of female or yin energy coming through, which is a lot more about feeling, a lot more about being true to yourself and following your feelings. And that's why I think it's happening for not just you and I, but the listeners and people who are noticing that there's something bigger, because we see ourselves as separate, but of course the opposite of separation is unity. And so we are part of this planet, we're part of each other's lives, and all of us are going through a shift, whether you notice it or not. If you're not noticing it, it's probably because you're stuck in your head. Whereas if you are noticing it, it's because you're more aware of the energy of things. So I think there's a shift. We're not separate, and that's why it's good to be aware of that.
And is that like, that's like a planetary thing? Like, I hear some of these kind of things, but I don't really know much about it. So is that like the alignments of like, where does it come from?
Good question. Yeah, so it would be astrological. So just for the listeners, very briefly, we've got the mental body, our mind. We've got the physical body, our body. We've got the etheric body. We've got the astral body. We've got the karmic body. There's basically layers that create who we are as humans. And most people think in terms of it's I am my mind. I think, therefore I am. That's kind of the wrong quote. Actually, it's I am, therefore I think. My thinking is just one aspect of me, rather than seeing myself as just who I think I am. So we've got to feel our body, we've got to think, we've got a karma that we were born with, we're affected by huge planets out there which do have an enormous pull, push, influence on us, and collectively their energy is affecting us too, just like we're affected by the sun. We're 70% water, we're affected by the moon, obviously the tides are affected by the moon too. So we are affected by these huge things. It's affected by global consciousness as well, of humanity, and the stuff that you listen to on the news. Everything is affecting us, so we just need to be aware of that, and be open to stuff. I think being open is absolutely key, because
Well, you are living your best life, Dom, talking about astrology on a property investment podcast.
there we go. Yeah, I
You
mean,
definitely manifested this one.
I'm not all that into astrology. I'm still learning lots, but it is fascinating because it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. Therefore, it has validity. I think anything that's been around for a long time, there's clearly some core concepts that are worth listening to there. Otherwise, anything that's created has validity. If it's not, it wouldn't be created otherwise.
I think it's part of, for me, being open-minded to all these different things that maybe in the past I would have shunned and said was kind of like woo-woo. like even if, even if they aren't true, to just ponder and be open to the fact that they are true
Right.
challenges your own mental construct for
Yes.
who you think you are,
Right.
and the fact that you think you know it all. Like, we're so, as a species, and therefore individually, we're pretty arrogant to think that
Yeah.
we know how it's all going down. There's this massive
Yeah.
universe out there that we don't know a tiny proportion of what's going on out there. But yet somehow, because we're living in London, in that flat, in that place, we think we know it all and we've got it covered. And ultimately, I think it does serve you for a period of time, but then past a certain point, you're like, your world gets very small when you think you know it all. And
Right.
if you accept that you don't even know a tiny part of it, you don't even know who we don't even know who you really are.
Yeah.
And for me, I probably know less who I am than ever before, but that's just the most like opening,
Liberating. Yeah.
liberating. That is freedom, right? And that's the whole point of this podcast,
Okay,
really.
yes.
It's like, how do you create freedom? And maybe we should bring it back to that, like talking about, do you change your business or do you change your life? What's the freedom answer as part of that?
Well, quite. Oh, I mean, yeah, freedom is that ability to choose how you spend your time, your relationships, and the things that you choose to do. So freedom of time, choice, and relationships are the big ones. Um,
But
and
I would
that's
argue it's not. It's the freedom to choose how you feel about those things.
right. Good point. Yes, there we go. Yes, and the nice thing is that property allows the time to be able to have that thought in particular, have more
Yes.
time to have those thoughts. Because otherwise, if we're caught up in everyday life and working for someone else and various other things, then it makes it more difficult to have that freedom to feel.
Yes. I guess it's true. It's like this is the one thing I keep pondering. I'm like, we've gone on this whole thing, we've built this whole company, this,
Mm.
financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom. We fought for all of that. But now that I realize that actually those things aren't actually, like, you can have all of those things, but you can still have the same shitty feeling that you've always had inside, because
Yes.
until you can choose your feelings about things, you aren't free, even if you have all of those things. And part of me does ponder, it's like, when I used to work in market research and I had a job, if I'd have known this, if I'd have known what I know now, could I have just been happy with that?
Right.
Yes, like
Right.
absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Like, you don't you don't have to go through this whole thing to realize that, but in a way you also do, because I think until you've experienced time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom, or whatever those important to you, you think that those things must be the answer, and
Yeah.
almost you need the space to experience those to see that
Right.
that is not,
Isn't
that's just one part of it.
yes. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful.
This is a pretty deep podcast for 25 minutes worth of chat. So let's do our final thoughts, Dom. I feel this is a good place to draw it to a close. So let's come back to the initial question. So, should I change feeling or looking at things, or should I change my life? Should I change my business?
It always starts with you. So if you want to change something, change yourself first, definitely, and be content in the moment that you've done that, and will continue to do that. It's recommitting to changing yourself every day and every moment, rather than thinking it's sometime in the future, because the future's now.
Mm.
It's in this
And I
moment.
think once this current problem that you're focused on is solved, I just hear it all the time. Oh gosh, once this team issue is solved,
Mm,
it will all feel great. Oh, once that deal is over the line, once that refinance is sorted, once that investment is secured, once I've hit that cash flow thing, then all will be well. And the funny thing is, I've had people say that to me probably 10 to 20 times with for every time a new issue presents itself, because that's human nature, right? Like, we are always looking for the problem to solve. And if we just realize that it's actually not a big old the the problem is not the problem. The problem is how you feel about the problem. And if you're just excited by the proposition of solving that, and you're enjoying the time that you have to put into overcoming it,
yeah,
then, well, is it even a problem anyway?
there we go. Yeah, exactly. All our problems are in the future or past. When you're present, there's no problem, and you're just enjoying the journey.
So maybe your outside world will change, but the most effective and enjoyable way to change your outside world is to change how you feel about the outside world. Awesome. I hope we opened your mind to a different perspective on how you can deal with challenges. And if you can start doing this and get really good at it and get obsessed with implementing it in your life, it is incredible how much easier everything gets because you stop putting such big blockages in your way. If you want to geek out more on this stuff with us, we are running a retreat called the Property Business Breakthrough, which is all about shifting this perspective from changing the external world to changing your internal world. And that is all about breaking through the biggest challenge that's ultimately holding you back from raising finance, doing more deals and accelerating your path towards freedom. So we're running this in September 2024 in the Italian countryside in an epic villa. So if that's something you're interested to come and join us on, check out our website for more information. It's property-strategy.com/PBB. A truly transformational experience that's just for property investors, but it's all about removing that blockage, that raising finance and doing deals, whatever it is that's holding you back, getting right to the root cause underneath it all so that you can take a far easier road to growing your business. So go and check out our website if you want to know more. But for now, next week, you'll be joined by myself and Dave, and we're talking about the role of alcohol in the business. It might sound a bit random, but actually we have seen that it can be a real business growth killer if not harnessed in the right way. So here's our journey with alcohol and how we have shifted it to get a much better result in the business. So we'll see you next week.